So today we're going to talk about a way of evaluating art and thinking about art and design. And that is the elements and principles of design. In any field that has visual elements, you'll be able to use these elements and principles of design. So if we look on the left first, the elements of design, these are the tools to make art. So we've got line, shape, form, color, texture, space, and value. The first couple are very self explanatory. It's very obvious what a line is, what a shape is, etc. The last two I want to explain a little further. When we say space, we're talking about positive and negative space. So if you see this just basic human shape figure, we've got two of them here. We call that positive space. That is the space bounding objects. But the space between objects is very, very important as well. And that space is called negative space. And you'll see in this case, the negative space also creates a shape. It looks sort of like a candle shape, right? A fun use of negative space is the FedEx logo. So the positive space is the word FedEx, and look at the negative space between the E and the X. It creates an arrow. For value, we're talking about the scale from black to gray to white. So with value, I always do this trick where if I look at a painting or a design, I squint my eyes, and that helps me focus on just value a little easier, and it shuts off color and it helps me focus on okay, what parts of the drawing are darkest, what parts of the drawing are lightest. That's value. Now over here is the principles of design, and that's how we use these tools on the left to make art. So these are more conceptual. Pattern, several repeated shapes or lines or forms or colors or textures. Contrast, so making an element stand out more by, for instance, using the value of black and the lighter value of white on this side. Emphasis, so drawing our attention to a specific element by using other elements. So in this case, we used the color red to emphasize this single figure. Balance, super important. There is asymmetrical balance where a composition is balanced even though they're not exactly the same on either side. So we do have balance here in this, and even though there are 8 figures here and just 1 figure here. And why is that? Because the scale of this figure takes up about the same amount of space as the scale of this side. Proportion and scale. So it's related to balance. Right now, on the left, the scale of this figure is much larger than the scale of the figure on the right. Harmony is probably one of the hardest terms, but it's also the most intuitive. When you see a painting and it just looks right, it just feels like it's finished, like it's complete. That usually has a lot to do with harmony. That all of the elements are working together to create a satisfying, complete image. And rhythm and movement, that is when there is a sense of movement in a design, a sense of movement in a painting. So this array of figures creates a sense of movement, like a swoosh to the right here. Okay, so let's put these elements and principles in practice. We'll use this vocabulary to talk about the design. Okay, so let's take this logo. Let's look at the elements here. So we've got some typography. We've got a figurative image of a farm worker and some little details here. So our elements: line, shape, color, texture, space. What pops out? Like, let's say we use the element of line, and now we can go to the other column and see if line is used in a specific way. So if I choose line here, does line create a pattern? Does line create contrast, emphasis, balance, proportion, harmony, rhythm? Let's go back to the image. Yeah, I would say that line does a great job at creating a sense of harmony here, right? There's the circle, the lines, the strokes here create this nice symmetry. That's another principle. And it also creates a lot of movement, like all of these lines that are jutting out from the center create a lot of movement. Another element is color, and I would say color is used to emphasize specific elements here. So, for instance, this overall use of a basic color palette of just 3 or 4 colors here really allows for this farm worker to pop out because the contrast between this green and the yellow really pop out this figure. And it's also a harmonious use of color too. This green isn't just used in the background here, but it's also used as the glove for the farm worker. Let's see if there are any other things I can pick up using these elements and principles of design here. We talked about line, color, the use of shape we could talk about. Is there texture? Not really. Negative and positive space and value. Let's see. Shape for sure. There's really basic simplified shapes for this figure here. It's not photorealistic. It's very simplified, and it creates a nice strong sense of movement. The use of negative space creates a strong sense of asymmetrical balance, right? If we did a line down the middle here, what's on the right and what's on the left isn't exactly the same, but it still feels balanced. Over here and over here, the negative space adds up to being about the same, and everything does feel spaced out well to make it readable and legible. And that's really important for design because you're trying to communicate ideas here, right? Fair food is very easy to read. Consumer powered worker certified is also easy to read. Notice the space between the letters, which is called leading. I think any further out, it would start to get hard to read. I think food here even feels just a bit too widely spaced if I was to have any criticism about this logo. And there's just a nice sense of variety here too. There's a lot to look at. Your eye moves around very well through this. These stars are a nice little detail. If we squint our eyes, there's a nice contrast of value. Nice popping white in certain areas, dark areas as well, the blacks. And if you squint your eyes, you can see that the green falls into a gray, light gray zone. So in terms of value, it's very simplified. It's high contrast. All right, so that's an example of how we use the elements of principles of design to talk about design, to talk about art. And once you've kind of mastered and memorized all of these terms, you can start to figure out what works and doesn't work in your own designs. And then you can make your designs better.